Reese Maddox came to town to claim an outlaw's bounty, but when the target turns out to be a schoolteacher with 3 orphaned children, the hunter must choose duty or a new life worth dying for. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Morning came to Copper Hollow with a blaze of orange and red across the desert sky. Reese woke early, a habit formed over years of tracking and hunting. But today, for the first time in as long as he could remember, he had no plan, no target to pursue, just questions that kept him awake through the night. He made his way downstairs to find the saloon already busy. Miners heading to work stopped for a quick drink, and the bartender nodded at Reese as he took a seat at a corner table. "Still with us, I see," the bartender said, bringing over a cup of coffee. "Thought you were just passing through." "Found reason to stay a bit longer," Reese replied, taking the coffee. The bartender raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't have anything to do with our schoolteacher, would it? Saw you fixing her fence yesterday. News traveled fast in small towns, just helping out." "Miss Boone's special to this town," the bartender said, his voice turning serious. "Those kids too, anyone causing trouble for them would find themselves unwelcome real quick." The warning was clear. "I understand." "Good." The bartender moved, away to serve another customer, leaving Reese to his thoughts. After breakfast, Reese found himself walking toward the schoolhouse again. He told himself he was still gathering information, still making up his mind. But deep down, he knew he was. Already in deeper than he'd ever intended. The sound of children's voices reached him before he rounded the corner. They were in the yard, gathered around Ilara, who was reading from a book. She wore a simple yellow dress today, her hair loose around her shoulders, catching the morning light. She looked up as he approached, a smile starting to form before she caught herself and turned serious again. "Class, we have a visitor," she said. "Continue with your reading while I speak with Mr. Maddox." She walked over to him, stopping at the fence he had repaired. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Brought something for the children," Reese said, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Paper and some chalk." Noticed we're running low. Surprise crossed her face as she took the package. "Thank you, that's unexpectedly kind. I'm not just a killer, Miss Boone." Her eyes met his. "I never said you were. But you hunt people for money. It amounts to the same thing, doesn't it?" Before he could answer, Tommy ran over, his face bright with excitement. "Mr. Maddox, did you come to hear our lessons? I can spell mountain now." Ilara's expression softened as she looked at the boy. "Tommy, Mr. Maddox is busy. He just came to drop something off." "Actually," Reese found himself saying, "I'd like to hear it, if that's all right." Tommy beamed and grabbed Reese's hand, pulling him toward the other children. "Come on, I'll show you." For the next hour, Reese sat on a bench in the schoolyard, watching Ilara teach. She was patient and kind, finding ways to make learning exciting for the children. Even Jimmy, who seemed more cautious around Reese, eventually showed him a map he had drawn of the territory. "Miss Ilara says I have a good eye for detail," Jimmy said proudly. "She's right," Reese agreed, studying the carefully drawn map. "You ever think about becoming a scout? Army always needs men who can read the land." Jimmy's eyes widened. "You think I could do that? With talent like this?" "Absolutely." The boy smiled, the first genuine smile Reese had seen from him. "My pa was in the army before he died. Miss Ilara says I take after him." "Your pa would be proud," Reese said, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest. When lunchtime came, Ilara dismissed the children to eat their sandwiches under the big cottonwood tree at the edge of the yard. She sat down next to Reese on the bench. "You're good with them," she said. "Especially Jimmy. He doesn't warm up to people easily. He's a good kid. They all are." "Yes, they are." She looked over at the children, her expression tender. "They deserve better than what they've had." "How did they come to be with you?" Ilara sighed. "Their parents owned the general store. When the fever hit 2 years ago, they were among the first to get sick. I helped care for them, but..." She shook her head. Nothing could be done. Jimmy was old enough to understand, but Sarah and Tommy, they kept asking when their mama and papa were coming home. "So you took them in." "What else could I do? Leave them alone? Let them be separated and sent to orphanages?" She turned to him. "I know what it's like to lose everything, Mr. Maddox. To have no one left. I couldn't let that happen to them." Reese thought about his own childhood. The years in the orphanage after his parents died in the fire. The cold nights and empty stomachs. The fights and beatings. He'd run away at 15, living by his wits until he found work as a tracker. "You gave them a family," he said quietly. "I tried." She looked at him curiously. "You understand, don't you? You've lost people too." He nodded. "Everyone has. Not like you have." She studied his face. "I can see it in your eyes. The same look Jimmy had when he realized his parents weren't coming back." For a moment, Reese felt exposed, as if she could see right through the walls he'd built around himself. "It was a long time ago. Some wounds never fully heal," she said softly. "They just become part of who we are." Before he could respond, Sarah called out from under the tree. "Miss Ilara, can Mr. Maddox stay for our picnic?" Ilara looked at him, questioningly. "I don't want to intrude," he said. "You bought them paper and chalk," she replied with a small smile. "I think you've earned a sandwich at least." The afternoon passed in a blur of children's laughter and simple pleasures. Reese couldn't remember the last time he'd spent hours just sitting in the sun, listening to stories and watching clouds drift across the sky. When it was time for the children's nap, Ilara invited him to help her in the garden. "These flowers," he said, kneeling beside her in the dirt, "they're not native to this area." "No." She smiled as she tended a cluster of bright blooms. "I ordered the seeds from back east. Everyone said they wouldn't grow in desert soil, but I'm stubborn." "I'm beginning to see that," Reese said, a hint of humor in his voice. She glanced at him, surprised by his almost smile. "The first winter was hard. I nearly gave up. But then spring came and a few of them bloomed." She touched a delicate purple flower. "Now they come back stronger every year." "Like you," he said. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding. Perhaps. Or something deeper. Ilara broke the gaze first. "Why are you really still here, Mr. Maddox? It's been 3 days. You've had plenty of chances to either take me in or kill me." "Reese," he said. "Call me Reese." "Reese," she repeated, the name soft on her lips. "That doesn't answer my question." He looked toward the schoolhouse where the children were sleeping. "I've been a bounty hunter for 9 years. Never questioned a job, never failed to bring in my mark." He turned back to her. "Until you." "What's different about me?" "Everything," he said simply. "The woman I was sent to find is a criminal. A thief who rode with killers. But the woman I found," he gestured to the schoolhouse, the garden, the quiet peace she had built. "This woman is something else entirely." "I'm still the same person," she said. "I still did those things." "But you changed. People can," she said. "If they want to." Sadly enough, they worked in silence for a while, the questions between them too big for casual conversation. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Ilara stood and brushed the dirt from her hands. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she asked hesitantly. "The children would like it, and I—" She paused. "I would too." Reese knew he should refuse, keep his distance, remember why he came to Copper Hollow in the first place, but instead he heard himself say, "I'd like that." Dinner was a simple affair, beans, stew and cornbread, but the atmosphere was warm and lively. The children chattered about their day, and Ilara laughed at their stories. Reese found himself drawn into their conversations, answering Tommy's endless questions about his travels and telling Sarah about the horses he had owned. After the meal, while Ilara was putting the children to bed, Reese sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. He could hear Ilara's voice inside, reading a bedtime story. The gentle cadence of her words drifted through the open window, weaving a spell of comfort and safety. When she finally joined him on the porch, the night was fully dark, the desert, silent except for the distant howl of a coyote. "They're asleep," she said, sitting beside him on the step. "They wore themselves out today, especially Tommy. He's quite taken with you. He's a good kid. Reminds me of myself at that age. Before—" He trailed off. "Before what?" she asked softly. Reese rarely spoke of his past. It served no purpose, dwelling on things that couldn't be changed. But tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, with Ilara's presence beside him, the words came unexpectedly. "Before the fire," he said. I was 7 when our house burned down. My parents didn't make it out. I'm sorry, she said, her voice gentle with genuine compassion. It was a long time ago. What happened to you after? Orphanage, then the streets, then whatever work I could find. He looked out at the dark outline of the desert. Turned out I was good at tracking, finding things and people that didn't want to be found. And that led to bounty hunting. He nodded. It paid well, and I told myself I was bringing criminals to justice, making the world safer. He turned to look at her. It was simpler when I believed that. And now? Now I'm sitting on a porch, with a woman I was sent to kill, wondering if everything I've done for the past 9 years has been wrong. Ilara was quiet for a long moment. My parents died too, she finally said. Fever took them both in the same week. Jackson, my brother, was all I had left. He was wild, always in trouble, but he was family. When he said we should head west, make our fortune, I went with him. She sighed. I didn't know what he meant by making our fortune until we were already deep in it. The robberies, she nodded. The first one, I was just the lookout. Didn't even know they were going to rob the stage until it was happening. I was terrified, but we got away with it and suddenly we had money, food, nice clothes. She looked down at her hands. It's easy to justify things when you're hungry and scared. What changed? Jackson changed. Each job got more violent. The last straw was when he shot a guard who was just doing his job. The man had children. Her voice broke slightly. That night I took my share of the money and ran, just rode until I couldn't anymore, ended up here. And you became a teacher. I always loved books, learning. In another life I might have gone, to college back east, she smiled faintly. Teaching seemed like a way to do some good, maybe make up for some of the bad. You've done that, Reese said. Any fool can see it. She turned to him, her face pale in the moonlight. So, what happens now, Reese Maddox? You know my story. You know I'm guilty of the things on that poster. Are you going to take me in? Collect your $800? The question hung in the air between them. Reese knew what he should do, what he had always done. But looking at Ilara, feeling the warmth of her presence beside him, he couldn't imagine raising his gun against her. Couldn't imagine tearing her away from the children who needed her, from the life she had built. No, he said finally. I'm not. Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by suspicion. Why not? What's changed? Maybe I have, he said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. Maybe you changed me. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and feelings neither had expected. Then, as if drawn by some force beyond their control, they leaned toward each other. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper, more urgent. When they finally pulled apart, Ilara's eyes were wide with surprise and something else, hope perhaps, or fear. This is a mistake, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Probably, Reese agreed, his hand still cupping her face. But I'm making it anyway. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. What are we doing, Reese? This can't end well. You know that. I don't know much of anything anymore, he admitted, except that I don't want to leave. Before she could respond, a voice called from the darkness. Miss Ilara, you out here? They moved apart quickly as a figure approached the porch. It was Dan, the town's telegraph operator. Sorry to disturb you so late, he said, tipping his hat, but a message came for Mr. Maddox here. Bartender said I might find him with you. Reese stood, suddenly alert. A message for me? Who knows I'm here? Dan shrugged. Didn't say. Just asked if a Reese Maddox was in town. He handed over a folded piece of paper, paid extra for urgent delivery. Ilara rose to stand beside Reese, her face tense. Thank you, Dan. After. The telegraph operator left, Reese unfolded the paper. The message was brief, but it sent a chill through him. Heard you found the Boone woman. Coming to collect. Save some for us. Burke. What is it? Ilara asked, seeing his expression. Trouble, Reese said, handing her the telegram. Burke is another bounty hunter, one I've worked with before. Someone must have seen me here and put it together. Ilara read the message, her face draining of color. They're coming for me. Yes. How? Many? Burke never travels alone, 3, maybe 4 others with him. She looked toward the schoolhouse, fear in her eyes. The children, if there's shooting, we need to get you out of here, Reese said. All of you, tonight. And go where, they'll just follow. Reese knew she was right. Bounty hunters like Burke didn't give up easily, not with $800 at stake. Then we fight, he said. Or I do. What do you mean? I can meet them outside town, tell them you're already gone, that I lost your trail. They won't believe you. Probably not. He looked at her steadily. But it might buy you time to get away. Ilara shook her head. No, I won't let you face them alone, not for me. I can handle Burke. And his men? 4 against 1? She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. No, I ran once before. I'm not running again. This is my home. Those children's home. I'll fight for it. Reese knew that look. It was the same determination he'd seen when she defended the children, when she spoke of her garden, when she built this life from nothing. Then we both fight, he said, but the children need to be somewhere safe. Ilara nodded. Martha at the boarding house. She can take them. Pack what you need, just essentials. As Ilara hurried inside to wake the children, Reese stood on the porch, scanning the darkness. Burke and his men wouldn't arrive until tomorrow at the earliest, but once they did, Copper Hollow would become a battlefield, and for the first time in his life, Reese Maddox would be fighting against his own kind. For a woman with a price on her head. A woman he was starting to think he couldn't live without. The children were confused and frightened when Ilara woke them, but they didn't question her when she told them they needed to go stay with Martha for a few days. They packed their small bags quietly, wide eyes watching as Reese checked his guns. Is someone bad coming? Tommy asked, his voice small. Reese knelt down to the boy's level. Some men are coming who don't understand that Miss Ilara is good. But I'm going to make sure they don't bother any of you. Are you going to shoot them? Jimmy asked, his expression serious beyond his years. Only if I have to, Reese said honestly. Sometimes talking works better than shooting. Jimmy looked doubtful but nodded. My pa said a man only draws his gun when he's ready to use it. Your pa was right. Reese put a hand on the boy's shoulder. I need you to be brave now. Take care of your brother and sister. Can you do that? Jimmy straightened his shoulders. Yes, sir. Good man. The walk to the boarding house was tense. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, every sound a warning. Martha, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, took the children in without question. When Ilara explained there might be trouble. Don't you worry about these little ones, she assured them. They'll be safe with me. The children clung to Ilara when it was time to say goodbye. Sarah cried, and Tommy wrapped his arms around Ilara's neck, refusing to let go. It's just for a little while, Ilara promised, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Be good for Martha. I'll come get you soon. Promise? Tommy asked. Promise. She kissed his forehead. I love you all so much. As they walked back to the schoolhouse in the moonlight, Reese could feel Ilara trembling beside him. He took her hand, and she gripped it tightly. We should get some rest, he said when they reached the porch. Tomorrow we'll come early. She nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes. What if we can't stop them? What if something happens to the children? Nothing will happen to them, Reese said firmly. Or to you, not while I'm alive. That's what I'm afraid of, she whispered. I couldn't bear it if you got hurt because of me. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. Ilara. Boone, in all my life I've never had anything worth fighting for. Until now. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. Stay with me tonight, she said softly. Just stay. Reese knew he should refuse. Keep his distance. Remember the danger that was coming. But as she led him inside, closing the door on the dark night and uncertain future, he followed willingly. For tonight, at least, they had this, a moment of peace before the storm. A chance to hold on to something good in a world that had shown them both so much pain, and if tomorrow brought death, at least he would die knowing he had finally found something worth living for. Dawn broke over Copper Hollow with a blood-red sky. Reese stood at the window of Ilara's small bedroom, watching the sun rise over the desert. Behind him, Ilara still slept, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in the early morning light. Last night had changed everything. In her arms, he had found something he never knew he was missing: tenderness, acceptance, a feeling of belonging. For the first time in his life, Rhys Maddox had let down his guard completely, and instead of pain, he had found comfort. But now morning had come, bringing with it the reality of their situation. Burke and his men would arrive today, maybe by noon, and when they did, this fragile peace would shatter. Rhys dressed quietly, not wanting to wake Ilara yet. Let her have a few more minutes of sleep before the day's troubles began. He made his way to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee, his mind working through their options. They could run, pack up and flee before Burke arrived. But bounty hunters were trackers by trade. They would follow. And even if they managed to escape, what kind of life would that be for Ilara and the children? Always looking over their shoulders, never putting down roots. No, running wasn't the answer. They had to make a stand here in the home Ilara had built. But how? Rhys was good, the best even, but Burke would bring numbers. 4 against 2 weren't. Odds he liked. The floorboards creaked, and he turned to see Ilara standing in the doorway. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back from her face. Even with worry in her eyes, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." He poured her a cup of coffee. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I expected, given the circumstances." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. "What about you?" "Been thinking about how to handle Burke and his men." She sat at the small kitchen table. "And we need help." Rhys joined her at the table. "Burke won't come in quietly. There will be shooting." "The sheriff. Town this size, sheriff's probably just some old cowboy with a badge. No match for professional killers." Ilara's hands tightened around her cup. "Then what? The people here respect you, care about you. Some of them might be willing to stand with us. I can't ask them to risk their lives. You don't have to." Rhys reached across the table and took her hand. "I will." After breakfast, they walked into town together. The streets were already busy with morning traffic, miners heading to work, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, women hanging laundry in the yards. Their first stop was the boarding house to check on the children. Martha greeted them at the door, assuring them that Jimmy, Sarah, and Tommy were fine. "They're in the back garden helping my husband with the chickens," she said. "Would you like to see them?" "Better not," Ilara said reluctantly. "If they see me, they'll want to come home, and it's not safe yet. Any trouble, you send them to the cellar," Rhys instructed. "Keep them there until one of us comes." Martha's face grew serious. "Is it that bad?" "Could be," Rhys said honestly. "Men coming to town aren't the kind to care about who gets hurt. What do they want?" Ilara and Rhys exchanged a glance. "Me," Ilara said finally. "They want me." Martha's eyes widened. "You? But why would anyone—" "It's a long story," Ilara said. "One I should have told you all a long time ago. But right now, we need to make sure the children are safe." "They will be," Martha promised. "No one will touch those babies while I'm breathing." Their next stop was the saloon. Despite the early hour, several men were already inside, nursing drinks or playing cards. The bartender looked up as they entered, his eyebrows rising at the sight of the schoolteacher in his establishment. "Miss Boone," he said, nodding. "Unusual to see you here." "I need to talk to you, Frank," she said, "and to anyone else who will listen." The bartender sensed the seriousness in her voice. "Something wrong?" Rhys stepped forward. "Men coming to town, bounty hunters, looking for trouble." A hush fell over the saloon as the other patrons turned to listen. "What kind of trouble?" asked a burly miner at a corner table. "The kind that gets people killed," Rhys said bluntly. "Ilara." Moved to the center of the room. "I need to tell you all something. Something I should have said when I first came to Copper Hollow." She took a deep breath. "Before I came here, before I was your school teacher, I was someone else. I rode with the Boone Gang." Murmurs swept through the room. Everyone had heard of the Boone Gang, notorious train robbers who had terrorized the territory for years. "The leader, Jackson Boone, was my brother," Ilara continued. "After our parents died, I joined him, helped with robberies." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of men who had trusted her, whose children she had taught. I never killed anyone, never even held a gun, but I was part of it, and now there's a bounty on my head. $800, added a voice from the back of the room. Dead or alive. All eyes turned to see a lean, hard-faced man standing in the doorway. He wore dusty trail clothes and had a gun belt slung low on his hips. Behind him stood 3 more men, equally rough-looking and armed. "Burke," Reese said, his hand moving instinctively to his own gun. "You're early?" "Rode through the night," Burke said, stepping into the saloon. His cold eyes scanned the room before settling on Ilara. "Didn't want to miss the party." Ilara straightened her back, facing him without flinching. "There doesn't need to be any trouble." Burke laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Trouble's already here, ma'am. Been here since Maddox decided to go soft instead of doing his job." He turned to Reese. "Never thought I'd see the day, the great Reese Maddox brought down by a pretty face." "Walk away, Burke," Reese said quietly. "Find another bounty." $800? Not likely." Burke's eyes narrowed. "What's your game here, Maddox? Planning to turn her in yourself? Cut us out?" "No one's turning her in." Burke studied Reese's face, then let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. You've actually gone and fallen for her." He shook his head. "That's a bad career move, partner. I'm not your partner." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The other patrons had edged away, leaving a clear space between the 2 groups of men. Frank the bartender had quietly reached under the bar, probably for the shotgun Reese knew he kept there. "Miss Boone," Burke said, tipping his hat with mock politeness, "I'll give you one chance to come quietly. Save these good people the mess." "She's not going anywhere with you," Reese said. "Then I guess we do this the hard way." Burke's hand hovered near his gun. "Your choice, Maddox. Step aside or go down with her." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Burke's hand moved toward his holster. Reese reached for his own gun, but before either man could draw, the sound of a shotgun being cocked filled the room. "That's enough," Frank said, the shotgun steady in his hands. "No shooting in my place." Burke hesitated, eyeing the bartender. "This isn't your fight, old man." "Maybe not," Frank replied. "But Miss Boone has been a part of this. Town for 3 years. Taught half the children here to read. Nursed folks through the fever. Far as I can see, whatever she did before, she's paid for it by her actions here." Murmurs of agreement came from around the room. Several of the miners had moved to stand near Ilara and Reese. "The lady says she never killed nobody," said the burly miner who had spoken earlier. "And she's earned our trust. So maybe you boys should just ride on out of here before things get unfriendly." Burke looked around the room, reassessing the situation. His men had spread out, hands near their weapons, ready for trouble. "This isn't over," Burke said finally. "We'll be in town a while. When you're ready to talk sense, Maddox, you know where to find me." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Boone? Might want to check on those orphans of yours. Never know what might happen to kids left all alone." The threat hung in the air, clear as day. Ilara paled, and Reese took a step forward, rage building inside him. "You go near those children, Burke, and I will kill you," he said, his voice deadly. "Quiet. Just saying," Burke replied with a cold smile. "World's a dangerous place." With that, he and his men left the saloon. The moment they were gone, Ilara turned to Reese. "The children. We need to get to them." "I'll go," Frank said, grabbing his coat. "Send my boy to stand watch at the boarding house. They won't try anything in broad daylight." "Don't be too sure," Reese warned. "Burke plays by his own rules." As the men in the saloon dispersed, offering words of support to Ilara, Reese pulled her aside. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Burke won't wait long." "I'm not hiding," she replied firmly. "Those are my children," he threatened. "I won't cower while they're in danger." "Ilara, no." Her eyes flashed with determination. "I spent 3 years building a life here. I won't." "Let him take it away." Reese knew that look, knew there was no arguing with her. "Then we prepare, and when they come, we're ready." Throughout the morning, word spread through Copper Hollow about the bounty hunters and their threats. To Reese's surprise, people rallied around Ilara. Men who had children in her school came to offer their help. Women brought food and supplies to the boarding house, where Martha had barricaded the doors and windows. By noon, a dozen men had gathered at the schoolhouse, armed with rifles and shotguns. They weren't gunslingers, just miners and shopkeepers, but they were determined to protect their own. "Never thought I'd see this," Reese said, as he and Ilara stood on the porch, watching the men set up positions around the property. "What? An entire town standing against bounty hunters for someone with a price on their head." He looked at her with newfound respect. "You've earned their loyalty. That's rare." "They're good people," she said. "I just wish they weren't in danger. Because of me. Some things are worth fighting for." He took her hand. "You taught me that." As the day wore on, tension grew. Burke and his men had taken rooms at the hotel across from the saloon, occasionally appearing on the street, but making no moves. It was a waiting game, and everyone knew it. By evening, Reese had organized the town's defenders as best he could. The schoolhouse was secure, with men posted at all approaches. The boarding house where the children stayed was similarly guarded, but Reese knew it couldn't last. Sooner or later, Burke would make his move. As night fell, Ilara stood at the window of the schoolhouse, watching the lights of the town twinkle in the darkness. Reese came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You should try to get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow might be a long day." "I can't sleep," she replied. "Not with the children away, not with all these people risking their lives for me." He turned her to face him. "You would do the same for any of them." "Yes," she admitted. "But that doesn't make it easier." Reese brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Nothing about this is easy, but we'll get through it." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've never seen anything worth fighting for before." He cupped her face in his hands. "And now I have you, the children, this life you've built." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm scared, Reese." "I know." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "So am I." They stayed that way for a long time, drawing strength from each other as the night deepened around them. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Ilara, and she fell asleep in Reese's arms. He carried her to the small bed in the back room and covered her with a blanket before returning to his vigil at the window. Around midnight, he spotted movement in the darkness, shadows moving between buildings, approaching the schoolhouse. Reese counted at least 6 men, more than Burke had shown earlier. He must have recruited additional help from somewhere. Silently, Reese woke the men sleeping in the main room of the schoolhouse. "They're coming," he whispered. "Get ready." As the defenders took their positions, Reese went to wake Ilara. She was already up, strapping on a gun belt he had given her earlier. "You know how to use that?" he asked. "My brother taught me," she said grimly. "I never wanted to, but he insisted. Said a woman alone needed protection." "Stay back from the windows," Reese instructed. "And if things go bad—" "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't say it." He pulled her close for a brief, fierce kiss. "Whatever happens, I don't regret a single moment with you." "Neither do I," she whispered, against his lips. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Somewhere in the front of the schoolhouse, a window had been broken. Seconds later, the smell of smoke filled the air. "Fire!" someone shouted. "They're trying to burn us out!" Reese rushed to the front room to see flames licking at the curtains. Men were already working to put it out, using blankets to smother the fire before it could spread. Outside, a voice called through the darkness, "Maddox, send out the woman and nobody else gets hurt!" "Go to hell, Burke!" Reese shouted back. Gunfire erupted from the darkness, bullets splintering the wooden walls of the schoolhouse. The defenders returned fire, shooting at muzzle flashes in the night. "They're trying to circle around back," someone yelled. Reese moved to the rear window, spotting 2 figures creeping through the garden. He aimed carefully and fired. One man fell, crying out in pain. The other retreated into the darkness. The gunfight continued. Sporadic bursts of firing followed by tense silence. Reese moved from window to window, directing the defense, always keeping Ilara in his sight. She remained steady, helping reload weapons and tending to a man who had been grazed by a bullet. Just when it seemed they might hold out, a new threat emerged. From his position at the front window, Reese saw Burke himself walking boldly up the path to the schoolhouse. In front of him, used as a shield, was Tommy. The little boy's face was streaked with tears. his pajamas rumpled as if he had been dragged. From bed, Burke held him firmly by one arm, a gun pointed at his head. "Maddox," Burke called, "I found something that might interest you and the lady." Ilara appeared beside Reese, her face draining of color as she saw Tommy. "No," she whispered. "How did they? I don't know." Reese's mind raced. The boarding house had been guarded. Someone must have gotten careless or been bought off. "What do we do?" Ilara asked, her voice shaking. Reese had no answer. For the first time in his life, he felt truly helpless. "I'm coming out to talk," he called to Burke. "Don't hurt the boy." "Reese, no," Ilara grabbed his arm. "He'll kill you." "I have to try." He looked into her eyes, memorizing every detail of her face. "If something happens to me, run. Get the other. Children, don't look back. I won't leave you." "Yes, you will," he kissed her forehead. "Because those children need you, and I need to know you're safe." Before she could argue further, Reese moved to the door. He handed his gun to one of the miners. "Keep her inside," he instructed, "no matter what happens." The man nodded grimly. Reese stepped onto the porch, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. Burke stood about 20 feet away. Tommy still clutched in front of him like a shield. "Let the boy go, Burke," Reese said calmly. "He's got nothing to do with this." "Oh, I think he does," Burke replied. "See, I did some asking around town. Found out these orphans mean a lot to the Boone woman. And you seem to care about them too, so here we are." Tommy whimpered, his eyes wide with fear as he looked at Reese. Mr. Maddox, I want Miss Ilara." It's okay, Tommy," Reese said gently. "Everything's going to be okay." "Sure it is," Burke said with a cold smile. "Just as soon as the woman comes out and surrenders, then the boy goes free. And if she doesn't," Burke pressed the gun barrel harder against Tommy's head, "then I guess the town will need to dig a mighty small grave." Rage like Reese had never known surged through him. This man, this monster, was threatening a child, a boy who had already lost so much, who trusted Reese to protect him. "You've changed, Burke," Reese said, stalling for time as he assessed the situation. "There was a time you had lines you wouldn't cross." "Yeah, well, $800 changes a man's perspective." Burke shifted his grip on Tommy. "Clock's ticking, Maddox. Send her out or the boy dies." Before Reese could respond, the schoolhouse door opened behind him. Ilara stepped onto the porch, her face pale but determined. "I'm here," she said. "Let Tommy go." "Ilara, no." Reese moved to block her path. "It's the only way," she said quietly. "I won't let him hurt Tommy." Burke grinned. "Smart woman. Come on down here, nice and slow." Ilara started down the porch steps, her eyes fixed on Tommy. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be fine." "Miss Ilara," Tommy cried, reaching for her with his free hand. Reese felt as if the world were collapsing around him. He couldn't let this happen. Couldn't let Ilara sacrifice herself. Couldn't let Tommy watch her die. As Ilara reached the bottom of the steps, a shot rang out from somewhere in the darkness. Burke jerked back, a look of surprise on his face as blood blossomed on his shoulder. His grip on Tommy loosened, and the boy broke free, running toward Ilara with a cry. She scooped him up in her arms and turned to run back to the porch. More shots came from the darkness, and Burke's men returned fire wildly, unsure where the attack was coming from. Reese grabbed Ilara and Tommy, pulling them back into the schoolhouse as bullets splintered the wood around them. Once inside, he barricaded the door and turned to see who had fired the shot that saved them. Jimmy stood in the middle of the room, a smoking rifle in his hands. His face was grim, his eyes older than his years. "Jimmy!" Ilara cried, still holding Tommy. "How did you—" "I followed them when they took Tommy," the boy said. "Saw them break into the boarding house. Martha tried to stop them, but they hit her." His voice trembled slightly. "I remembered what Mr. Maddox said about being ready to use a gun if you draw it, so I took Grandpa Miller's rifle from the wall and followed them." Reese looked at the boy with newfound respect. "You shot Burke?" Jimmy nodded. "Pa taught me to shoot before he died, said I needed to protect the family." He looked at Ilara and Tommy. "That's what I did." Ilara handed Tommy to one of the women and embraced Jimmy, tears streaming down her face. "You brave, brave boy." Outside, the gunfire had intensified. Burke's men were engaged with defenders positioned around the schoolhouse. Through the window, Reese could see Burke himself being dragged to cover by one of his men, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "This isn't over," Reese said. "They'll regroup, come back stronger." "What do we do?" Ilara asked, her arms still around. "Jimmy." Reese looked at the frightened boy in the woman's arms, at the brave child who had risked his life to save his family, at the woman who had changed his world, and he knew what he had to do. "You stay here," he said, picking up his gun from where the miner had placed it. "Keep the children safe." "Where are you going?" Ilara's eyes widened with understanding. "No, Reese. You can't face them alone." "I'm not leaving you a choice," he said firmly. "This ends tonight, one way or another." Before she could stop him, he slipped out the back door of the schoolhouse and disappeared into the darkness. Behind him, he could hear Ilara calling his name, her voice breaking with fear and desperation, but he couldn't turn back, couldn't risk her life or the children's any longer. If someone had to die tonight, it would be him, not Ilara, not the family she had built. As he moved through the shadows toward the hotel where Burke and his men had taken refuge, Reese felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something that mattered, something worth dying for. And if this was to be his last night on Earth, at least he would go knowing he had finally found love, finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere, to someone. With that thought in his heart, Reese Maddox, the bounty hunter who had never failed to bring in his mark, walked alone toward what might be his final confrontation. The night air was cold against Reese's face as he moved through the shadows of Copper Hollow. Gunfire had died down to occasional shots, Burke's men conserving ammunition, waiting for their next move. The town had fallen into an uneasy silence, broken only by hushed voices and the distant whinny of a horse. Reese kept to the darkness between buildings, his years of tracking making him nearly invisible as he approached the hotel where Burke had taken refuge. Through a ground-floor window, he could see movement, men gathering, preparing. Burke himself sat in a chair while one of his men bandaged his shoulder, his face twisted with rage. The boy's shot had struck true but hadn't been fatal. Burke was wounded, angry, and now even more dangerous. Reese counted 5 men inside, plus Burke. 2 more were likely posted as lookouts somewhere nearby. The odds weren't good, but Reese had faced worse. He checked his gun, 6 bullets in the chamber, another 12 in his pocket. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but maybe enough to end this if he was smart. Careful. Ruthless in a way he hadn't been for days now. As he considered his approach, he heard a soft footstep behind him. Before he could turn, a familiar voice whispered, "If you're planning to get yourself killed, you should have said goodbye properly." Ilara stood in the shadows, a rifle in her hands, her eyes bright with determination. "I told you to stay at the schoolhouse," Reese hissed, "with the children." "Jimmy and Sarah are safe with Martha and the others," she replied. "Tommy wouldn't let go of me, so I brought him to Lucy at the general store. Her husband is guarding them." She moved closer. "I'm not letting you face them alone. This isn't your fight. It's exactly my fight." Her voice was firm. "They came for me, Reese, put my children in danger, threatened the life I built." She raised the rifle slightly. "And I'm done running." Reese saw the steel in her eyes and knew arguing would be pointless. This was the woman who had fled her brother's gang to build a new life, who had taken in 3 orphans and raised them as her own, who had faced Burke with her head held high. "Stay behind me," he said finally, "and if things go bad—" "They won't," she cut him off. "Not if we work together." A plan began to form in Reese's mind. Not the desperate solo attack he had first envisioned, but something with a chance of success. "Burke's wounded but still dangerous," he said. 5 men with him inside the hotel, probably 2 more watching the street. "What's your plan?" "Draw them out, separate them, take them down one by one." Ilara nodded. "How do we start?" Reese pointed to a building across from the hotel. "The feed store. It's closed for the night. If we can get to the 2nd floor, we'll have a clear view of the hotel entrance." They moved through the darkness, careful to avoid the open street. The feed store's back door was locked, but Reese made quick work of it with a knife from his boot. "Where did you learn to do that?" Ilara whispered as they slipped inside. "Same place you did, I expect," he replied with a hint of a smile. Life has a way of teaching you things you never wanted to know. The store was dark and smelled of grain and burlap. They made their way up a narrow staircase to the second floor, where a small window overlooked the street. From this vantage point, they could see the hotel entrance clearly. "Now what?" Ilara asked. "Now we need a distraction." Rhys looked around the room, his eyes falling on a stack of empty feed sacks in the corner. Something to draw them out into the open. Understanding dawned on Ilara's face. "Fire. Just a small one," Rhys assured her. "Enough smoke to make them think the hotel's in danger. When they come out, we'll be waiting," she finished. Working quickly, they gathered the feed sacks and some loose straw. Rhys soaked them with a small amount of lamp oil from a nearby lantern. Then he tied the bundle to a length of rope. "Once I light this, I'll lower it down near the hotel's side entrance," he explained. "When the smoke starts rising, they'll send someone to check." "And I'll be ready," Ilara said, positioning herself at the window with the rifle. Rhys paused, looking at her with newfound respect. "You're not what I expected, Ilara Boone." "Neither are you, Rhys Maddox." She met his gaze. "I never thought I'd trust a bounty hunter with my life, or the lives of your children." "Our children," she corrected softly. "If we get through this..." The words hit Rhys like a physical blow. Our children, a family, things he had never dared to want suddenly within reach if they survived the night. With renewed determination, he lit the bundle of feed sacks. Smoke began to curl upward as he carefully lowered it out another window, using the rope to position it near the hotel's side entrance. Within moments, thick smoke was billowing up, creating the impression that the side of the hotel was on fire. It didn't take long for the reaction to come. The hotel's side door burst open, and two men rushed out, guns drawn, looking for the source. "Of the smoke. Now," Rhys whispered. Ilara took aim and fired. Her shot struck one man in the leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The second man spun around, firing wildly toward the feed store. Rhys leaned out and returned fire, his bullet finding its mark. The man fell and didn't move again. "Good shot," Rhys said. "My brother taught me more than lockpicking," Ilara replied grimly. The commotion had the desired effect. More of Burke's men appeared at the hotel entrance, trying to assess the situation. From their hidden position, Rhys and Ilara had the advantage. 2 down, Rhys counted. 4 more, plus Burke. The wounded man on the ground was calling for help. Another of Burke's men darted out to drag him back inside, exposing himself momentarily. Rhys took the shot, and the man staggered, but made it back into the hotel, leaving a trail of blood on the boardwalk. "Wounded, not dead," Rhys muttered. "Still 3 healthy ones, plus Burke." Inside the hotel, they could hear shouting. Burke's voice rose above the others, angry and desperate. Then silence fell, and Rhys tensed, knowing something was coming. "They're planning something," he whispered. "Stay alert." Suddenly, the street erupted in gunfire. Bullets smashed through the feed store window, forcing Rhys and Ilara to drop to the floor. Glass shattered around them, and wood splintered from the walls. "They've figured out where we are," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the danger. "We need to move." Rhys looked around frantically. "There must be another way out." A back window overlooked an alley behind the store. "There," Rhys pointed. "If we can get down to the alley, we can circle around behind them." They crawled across the floor as bullets continued to tear through the front of the building. When they reached the back window, Rhys broke the glass with his gun butt and cleared the frame. "I'll go first," he said, "then help you down." He swung his legs out the window and lowered himself until he was hanging by his hands. Then he dropped the remaining distance to the alley below. Pain shot through his ankle as he landed, but he ignored it, raising his arms to catch Ilara. "Jump," he called softly. "I've got you." She slid out the window and hung for a moment before letting go. Rhys caught her, staggering slightly under her weight, but keeping them both upright. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "What now?" "We circle around. Come up behind the hotel." They moved quickly through the alley, staying in the shadows. The gunfire had stopped, which worried Rhys more than the shooting. Burke and his men would be looking for them, might even have split up to cover more ground. As they approached the back of the hotel, Rhys's suspicions were confirmed. 2 men were searching the alleys, guns drawn, moving carefully from shadow to shadow. "Stay here," Reese whispered to Ilara. "I'll deal with them." "Be careful," she replied, squeezing his arm. Reese slipped away, becoming one with the darkness. He had spent years perfecting the art of moving silently, of striking without warning. Now he put those skills to use not to hunt a bounty, but to protect what he loved. The first man never knew what hit him. Reese came up behind him, clamped a hand over his mouth, and knocked him unconscious with the butt of his gun. He dragged the body into a darkened doorway, taking the man's weapon and ammunition. The second man was more alert, sensing something was wrong when his partner didn't respond to his low whistle. He turned just as Reese approached, raising his gun with a shout of alarm. Ilara's shot rang out before the man could fire. He crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. Reese looked back to see Ilara emerging from the shadows, rifle still raised. "I thought I told you to stay put," he said. "You're welcome," she replied with a hint of a smile. The wounded man on the ground moaned. Reese knelt beside him, pressing his gun to the man's head. "Where's Burke?" he demanded. "Inside," the man gasped. "Upstairs, room 6. How many more of you?" "Just one other. And Burke." The man's eyes were wide with fear. "Look, I just came for the money, didn't know there'd be kids involved." Reese's expression hardened. When a man puts a price on someone's head, there's always innocent people who get hurt. He struck the man with his gun, knocking him unconscious like his partner. "2 more, Ilara said. "We're almost there." The back door of the hotel was locked, but like the feed store, it didn't present much of a challenge. Once inside, they found themselves in a dimly lit hallway leading to the hotel's kitchen. "Stairs will be at the front," Reese whispered. "We'll have to cross the lobby." They moved cautiously through the kitchen and into the main hallway. The lobby was empty, the night clerk nowhere to be seen, probably fled when the shooting started. The staircase loomed ahead, dark and silent. As they approached, a floorboard creaked beneath Ilara's foot. Instantly, gunfire erupted from above, bullets splintering the wooden banister. Reese pushed Ilara behind a heavy desk, returning fire to give them cover. From upstairs, a voice called down, Burke's voice, strained. With pain and rage, "Maddox, I know that's you down there." "You and the Boone woman." "It's over, Burke," Reese called back. "Your men are down. Town's turned against you. Give it up." Harsh laughter was the only response. "Come up and get me then, if you've got the spine for it." Reese checked his ammunition. 3 bullets left in his gun, plus what he'd taken from Burke's man. "Not much, but it would have to do. He's baiting us," Ilara whispered. "Trying to draw us into the open." "I know." Reese thought for a moment. "There must be another way up." "Service. Stairs?" Ilara suggested. "For the maids, most hotels have them." They backtracked to the kitchen and found what they were looking for. A narrow staircase used by the hotel staff. Slowly, carefully, they ascended. Every creak of the old wood sending a jolt of tension through them. When they reached the second floor, Reese peered into the hallway. Room 6 would be near the main staircase where Burke was expecting them to appear. Instead, they would come from behind. "Stay back," Reese warned Ilara. "If something happens to me..." "Nothing is going to happen to you," she interrupted fiercely. "We're finishing this, together." They moved down the hallway, passing doors marked with brass numbers. When they reached room 6, Reese positioned himself to one side of the door, Ilara on the other. From inside they could hear movement, Burke and his remaining man preparing for an attack from the main staircase. Reese caught Ilara's eye and held up 3 fingers. She nodded, understanding his silent count. 3, 2, 1. Reese kicked the door with all his strength. The lock splintered and the door flew open. Inside, Burke and his last man spun around in surprise, their guns aimed at the main hallway. Reese fired twice, taking down Burke's companion before he could turn fully. Burke himself managed to get off a shot that grazed Reese's arm before Ilara fired, her bullet striking Burke in the chest. The bounty hunter staggered backward, his gun falling from his hand. Blood spread across his shirt as he collapsed into a chair, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You shot me," he gasped, looking at Ilara. "You threatened my children," she replied, her voice steady. Burke's eyes shifted to Reese, who stood with his gun still trained on the dying man. "Never thought you'd turn on your own kind." "You stopped being my kind when you put a gun to a child's head," Reese said coldly. A bloody smile crossed Burke's face. "Won't be the last. That poster..." Still out there. Others will come. Let them, Reese said. They'll find the same welcome you did. Burke's eyes glazed over and his head slumped forward. The bounty hunter who had terrorized the town was gone. The sudden silence was deafening. Reese lowered his gun, feeling the adrenaline drain from his body, leaving him shaky and tired. His arm burned where Burke's bullet had grazed him, but the pain was distant, unimportant. Ilara moved to his side, her face pale but determined. Is it over? For now, Reese said honestly. Burke was right about one thing. The poster is still out there. Others might come. Then we'll be ready. She touched his wounded arm gently. We should get this looked at. As they made their way back downstairs and out of the hotel, the first light of dawn was breaking over the desert. The streets of Copper Hollow were still empty, the town holding its breath after the night of violence. At the schoolhouse, they found the defenders still awake, weapons ready. A cheer went up when they appeared, tired but alive. Burke? One of the miners asked. Dead, Reese confirmed. His men too, or captured. Relief swept through the group. Martha appeared from inside, her face lighting up at the sight of Ilara. The children? Ilara asked immediately. Safe, Martha assured her. Jimmy and Sarah are sleeping. Tommy's with Lucy, asking for you every 5 minutes. Tears filled Ilara's eyes. Thank you for everything. After Reese's wound was cleaned and bandaged, they went to the general store to collect Tommy. The little boy flew into Ilara's arms, his face buried in her neck. I was scared, he sobbed. The bad man took me. I know, sweetheart, Ilara soothed, holding him close. But you were so brave. And now the bad men are gone. Tommy looked up at Reese, his eyes wide. Did you shoot them, Mr. Maddox? Some of them, Reese said honestly. But your brother Jimmy shot the worst one first. He saved you. Tommy's eyes widened. Jimmy did. He sure did. He's a real hero. A small smile broke through Tommy's tears. Can we go home now? Ilara looked at Reese, the question in her eyes more than just about returning to the schoolhouse. Yes, Reese said, answering both the spoken and unspoken questions. We can go home. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The bodies of Burke and his men were buried in unmarked graves outside town. The sheriff from the county seat finally arrived 2 days too late to take statements about the incident. To Reese's surprise, the sheriff showed little interest in Ilara's past. Far as I'm concerned, he said, whatever happened before she came to Copper Hollow is ancient. History. This town vouches for her, that's good enough for me. But Reese knew the danger wasn't over. As long as that wanted poster existed, as long as the $800 bounty remained, Ilara would never be truly safe. On the third day after the shootout, Reese saddled his horse before dawn. He left a note for Ilara, not trusting himself, to say goodbye in person. It was better this way, he told himself. Cleaner. He had one last job to do and he needed to do it alone. He was checking the saddle straps when a voice behind him made him freeze. Were you really going to leave without saying goodbye? Ilara stood in the early morning light, wrapped in a shawl against the desert chill. Her eyes were sad but unsurprised, as if she had expected this moment. I left a note, Reese said lamely. A note. She shook her head. After everything we've been through, you were going to leave me with a piece of paper. It's not what you think, isn't it? She stepped closer. You're running, Reese, just like I did once. I'm not running. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the wanted poster with Ilara's face on it. I'm going to find every copy of this. Track down whoever issued the bounty. Make sure no one ever comes looking for you again. Understanding dawned on her face. And then... He hesitated. Then, if you still want me, I'll come back. If I still want you? She moved closer, taking his face in her hands. Reese Maddox, do you really think I would let you walk out of our lives that easily? Our lives? Yes, our lives, mine, the children's, yours together. Her eyes held his, steady and sure. The children need you. I need you. I've spent 9 years hunting people for money, Reese said, the weight of his past heavy on his shoulders. I've killed men for bounties smaller than what's on your head. I'm not the kind of man who deserves a family." "You're exactly the kind of man who deserves a family," she countered. "A man who would risk his life to protect children who aren't his, who would stand against his own kind for what's right." She took the wanted poster from his hand. "We can deal with this together." "How?" "By living our lives, by being so much a part of this town that no one would dare come after us." She smiled slightly. "And maybe by having a word with the sheriff about clearing my name officially." Reese hadn't considered that possibility. If Ilara turned herself in, faced whatever charges remained against her, there was a chance she could be pardoned, especially with the sheriff's support and the town standing behind her. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Nothing worth having ever is." She moved even closer, her body warm against his in the cool morning air. "Stay, Reese. Help me build something good, something that lasts." The first rays of the rising sun caught her face, highlighting the hope in her eyes. And in that moment, Reese knew he couldn't leave. Not now. Not ever. "Okay," he said simply. "I'll stay." Her smile was like the dawn breaking over the desert, bright, full of promise, the beginning of something new. In the days that followed, life in Copper Hollow slowly returned to normal. The schoolhouse reopened, and children once again filled the yard with laughter and games. Reese found himself taking on odd jobs around town, fixing fences, helping at the livery stable, even assisting the aging sheriff when needed. The townspeople, who had once viewed him with suspicion, now greeted him with nods of respect. He had fought for one of their own, had risked his life to protect the town. In their eyes, he had earned his place among them. The children adjusted to his presence in their lives with surprising ease. Tommy followed him everywhere, eager to learn how to ride and shoot. Sarah brought him flowers from Ilara's garden and insisted he read her stories at night. Even Jimmy, the most cautious of the three, began to look up to Reese, asking for advice and hanging on his every word. And with Ilara, Reese found something he had never known he was missing: peace, belonging, the quiet joy of waking up beside someone who knew all of his darkness and loved him anyway. One evening, about a month after the shootout, Reese and Ilara sat on the porch of the schoolhouse watching the sunset. The children were inside, washing up for dinner. The desert stretched before them, painted in shades of gold and purple by the fading light. "I never thought I'd have this," Reese said quietly. "A home, a family?" Ilara rested her head on his shoulder. "Neither did I, not after everything I'd done. Do you ever regret it? Running from your brother's gang?" "Never," she said firmly. "It was the best decision I ever made. Led me here, to the children, to you." He took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he had placed there. Just a week before, the wedding had been small, just them, the children, and the townsfolk who had become their family. The sheriff had stood as witness, his presence a public acknowledgement that Ilara's past was forgiven, if not forgotten. "There's still a price on your head," Reese reminded her, "until we can get it officially removed." "I know." She didn't sound worried. "But we'll face that together when the time comes." As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Reese tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the gun he still wore. In the fading light, they could make out a group of riders approaching the town, at least 6 men, moving with purpose. "Get the children," Reese said, rising to his feet. "Take them to the cellar." Ilara stood beside him, her expression determined. "No, we stand together. The children are old enough to know when to hide." She called into the house and Jimmy appeared at the door. One look at his foster parents' faces told him everything he needed to know. "Riders coming?" he asked, already reaching for the rifle that now hung by the door. "Take your brother and sister to the cellar," Ilara instructed. "Stay there until we come for you." The boy nodded, disappearing back into the house. Moments later, they heard the cellar door close. Reese and Ilara walked to the edge of town, standing side by side as the riders approached. The setting sun cast long shadows before them, turning the dusty road to gold. "They'll kill you too," Ilara said quietly, her shoulder touching his. "Then they better be ready to die trying," he answered, his eyes on the horizon. She glanced at him, a question in her eyes. You sure you're not here to save me? No, he said, his gaze meeting hers. I'm here to stay. As the riders drew closer, Rhys felt a strange calm settle over him. Whatever came next, whatever battles they faced, they would face them together. The bounty hunter and the outlaw, the teacher and the drifter. Two broken people who had somehow found wholeness in each other. And if this was to be their last stand, at least they would make it together, defending the life they had built, the family they had formed, the love they had found against all odds. With the desert sun setting behind them and an uncertain future ahead, they stood tall, ready to face whatever came their way, hand in hand, side by side, as it was always meant to be.